Understanding the Israel-Palestine conflict. Part 2. Before we continue, please make sure to follow us so you don't miss on topics like these. This is a letter of perspective by Ludovic. On May 14, 1948, the State of Israel was created, sparking the First Arab-Israeli War. The war ended in 1949 with Israel's victory, but 750,000 Palestinians were displaced, and the territory was divided into three parts: the State of Israel, the West Bank of the Jordan River, and the Gaza Strip. Over the following years, tensions rose in the region, particularly between Israel and Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. Following the 1956 Suez Crisis and Israel's invasion of the Sinai Peninsula, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria signed mutual defense pacts in anticipation of a possible mobilization of Israeli troops. In June 1967, following a series of maneuvers by Egyptian President Abdel Gamal Nasser, Israel preemptively attacked Egyptian and Syrian air forces, starting the Six-Day War. After the war, Israel gained territorial control over the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza Strip from Egypt, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria. 6 years later, in what is referred to as the Yom Kippur War, or the October War, Egypt and Syria launched a surprise two-front attack on Israel to regain their lost territory. The conflict did not result in significant gains for Egypt, Israel, or Syria, but Egyptian President Anwar al-Sadat declared the war a victory for Egypt, as it allowed Egypt and Syria to negotiate over previously ceded territory. Finally, in 1979, following a series of ceasefires and peace negotiations, representatives from Egypt and Israel signed the Camp David Accords, a peace treaty that ended the 30-year conflict between Egypt and Israel. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict dates back to the end of the 19th century. In 1947, the United Nations adopted Resolution 181, known as the Partition Plan, which sought to divide the British Mandate of Palestine into Arab and Jewish states. On May 14, 1948, the State of Israel was created. Even though the Camp David Accords improved relations between Israel and its neighbors, the question of Palestinian self-determination and self-governance remained unresolved. In 1987, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians living in the West Bank and Gaza Strip rose up against the Israeli government in what is known as the First Intifada. The 1993 Oslo-Ue Accords mediated the conflict, setting up a framework for the Palestinians to govern themselves in the West Bank and Gaza, and enabled mutual recognition between the newly established Palestinian Authority and Israel's government. In 1995, the Oslo II Accords expanded on the first agreement, adding provisions that mandated the complete withdrawal of Israel from 6 cities and 450 towns in the West Bank. In 2000, sparked in part by Palestinian grievances over Israel's control over the West Bank, a stagnating peace process, and former Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon's visit to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam. In September 2000, Palestinians launched the Second Intifada, which would last until 2005. In response, the Israeli government approved the construction of a barrier wall around the West Bank. In 2013, the United States attempted to revive the peace process between the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. However, peace talks were disrupted when Fatah, the Palestinian Authority's ruling party, formed a unity government with its rival faction Hamas in 2014. Hamas, a spin-off of Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood founded in 1987 following the First Intifada, is one of 2 major Palestinian political parties and was designated a foreign terrorist organization by the United States in 1997. In the summer of 2014, clashes in the Palestinian territories precipitated a military confrontation between the Israeli military and Hamas, in which Hamas fired nearly 3,000 rockets at Israel, and Israel retaliated with a major offensive in Gaza. The skirmish ended in late August 2014, with a ceasefire deal brokered by Egypt, but only after 73 Israelis and 2,251 Palestinians were killed. After a wave of violence between Israelis and Palestinians in 2015, Palestinian President Mahmoud. The most far-right and religious government in Israel's history was inaugurated in late December 2022. The coalition government is led by Benjamin Bibi Netanyahu and his Likud party and comprises 2 ultra-Orthodox parties and 3 far-right parties, including the Religious Zionism Party, an ultra-nationalist faction affiliated with the West Bank settler movement. To reach a governing majority, Netanyahu made a variety of concessions to his far-right partners. Opponents have criticized the government's stated prioritization of the expansion and development of Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, which would significantly erode the prospects for a 2-state solution. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is one of the world's longest-running and most controversial conflicts. At its heart, it is a conflict between 2 self-determination movements, the Jewish Zionist Project and the Palestinian Nationalist Project, that lay claim to the same territory. But it is so much more complicated than that, with seemingly every fact and historical detail, small and large, litigated by the 2 sides and their defenders. Israeli Jews and Palestinian Arabs both want the same land, and a compromise has proven difficult to find. Israel is the world's only Jewish state, located just east of the Mediterranean Sea. Palestinians, the Arab population that hails from the land Israel now controls, refer to the territory as Palestine, and want to establish a state by that name on all or part of the same land. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is over. Who gets what land and how it's controlled? Though both Jews and Arab Muslims date their claims to the land back a couple thousand years, the current political conflict began in the early 20th century. Jews fleeing persecution in Europe wanted to establish a national homeland in what was then an Arab and Muslim majority territory in the Ottoman and later British Empire. The Arabs resisted, seeing the land as rightfully theirs. The primary approach to solving the conflict today is a so-called 2-state solution that would establish Palestine as an independent state in Gaza and most of the West Bank, leaving the rest of the land to Israel. Though the 2-state plan is clear in theory, the 2 sides are still deeply divided over how to make it work in practice. The alternative to a 2-state solution is a 1-state solution, wherein all of the land becomes either one big Israel or one big Palestine. Most observers think this would cause more problems than it would solve, but this outcome is becoming more likely over time for political and demographic reasons.